Our next speaker is Alex Hanlon, and so she's going to join us on stage shortly. Here is Alex and her very fancy Executive Director job title from the University of Canterbury. But in her spare time, obviously building buildings and reinvigorating Christchurch, she does a lot of other things. She's a self-confessed data geek. She loves quite a sentimentalist around movies. She also is into joinery, and she really likes me elaborating on joinery about hanging wooden front doors and all these sorts of things. And she's, yeah, we're going to see photographic evidence one day. But she is a passionate and a very constructive and effective leader that doesn't just wait to be told that something needs to be done. She makes things happen. And so what she's going to take you through now around artificial intelligence and machine learning is around what is going on, why is this important, and what has she been up to, and show you some things that you can do straight away to play with artificial intelligence and machine learning. So can you please join me in welcoming Alex to the stage?
Thank you, Darren, for not making too much of my joinery skills. I wanted to chat with you today about some of the work that we're doing at the University of Canterbury in my department, and the motivation for this was artificial intelligence, and that's the connect in terms of staying relevant for the conference today. So I'm going to hit you with a bit of technology just so I can share with you the research that I've been doing around this and how it's translating out in a number of different fields. And then we'll have a bit of a chat about some of the initiatives that we've got going at the university. I got a lot to say about the research that I do. And one of the things I've noticed over the last couple of days, people furiously writing notes. So what I've done is I've inserted a slide partway through with all the links for you. So get your phones out. And when we get to that, I'll pause for a moment, you take a photo and you're done, right? And then you can just relax, kick back and relax. So what have we got coming our way? I wanted to start by talking about robots, because one of the things that we think about when we think about artificial intelligence is we see it in a humanoid robotic form, right? So it's that whole I'll be back thing that happens, yeah? But actually the most prolific robots around the world are these ones. They have been used in manufacturing plants for many, many years now, so they don't feel quite so scary as the humanoid ones, probably because all you need to do is to step to one side and then they can't get you anymore. Right. We're starting to see a lot of robots in other areas though, and one of the areas that I'm interested in is learning, how learning happens. These are Neo robots. We use them a lot in universities now. They're starting to be seen in some classrooms, and what you're seeing on the screen at the moment is a Neo robot being used to teach a lesson to autistic kids. So one of the advantages of robots and autistic kids is the stimulation factor. So when we talk about autism and human teachers, there's a lot of stimulation that human teachers provide the kids. This overwhelms them quite a bit. And one of the things about a Neo robot is they have these kind of very plain, super cute faces, and the kids are able to interact with them. So it's a robot not necessarily designed for that purpose, but has certainly been able to come into that environment and make quite an impact. Another robot that we're starting to see around the place is the Pepper robot. These are robots stand about yay tall, unfortunately not readily available yet outside of Japan and the United States. Unless you're QUT, they've managed to get 3. I'm still dying to find out how they did that. So I want some in New Zealand in my library. But what they do essentially is they are able to meet and greet and direct you to places. So you see them in lobbies, foyers, waiting areas, that type of stuff. And there has been some really interesting research done recently by ASB Bank and Air New Zealand using these types of robots at a check-in in Sydney Airport. And just by giving people information to confirm that they are where they think they are and that their flight hasn't left yet, they were able to reduce the amount of self-reported anxiety in air traffic travel. So these are things that we're going to see a lot more of in our workplaces. The ones that start to feel a little bit freaky, I think, are ones like this one. This is Atlas. Atlas is owned by Boston Dynamics, which was a spin-off company out of MIT back in '92. It has been developed over many years and stimulated by the DARPA Robotics Challenge, which happened for 4 years and really propelled the industry in terms of what the mechatronics can do, to be able to do some pretty impressive stuff, right? So this is the robot that you need to be able to run away from. Okay, the good news is that this robot, the Atlas robot, and also the world's most advanced robot, this is Asimo, who's been developed by Honda, both have a problem that is about the rate at which technology evolves, and that's the battery pack. So on the back of the Atlas robot, the back of the Asimo robot, you'll see these battery packs. This robot is probably the most advanced robot that's almost available for retail. If you have a spare 8.5 million lying around, you can have one of these. Not currently supported out of Japan just yet, but we'll get there. So the battery pack on the back, though, only lasts for 2 hours. So the moral of the story, or the takeout from that, is that if you need to run away from a robot, just make sure that you can run for about 2 hours and 5 minutes. Now, I started with robots because one of the things that is important is that, you know, they're starting to come into the homes a lot, and they're using a lot of artificial intelligence in terms of avoiding objects and delivering coffee, as you could see from that clip. And so that they're one of the manifestations, I think, of artificial intelligence that is perhaps worrying us the most. But artificial intelligence is actually appearing in a whole bunch of other places as well. It has also been around for a long time. So the term artificial intelligence first got coined back in 1955. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens through the 60s, and I want you to cut me a bit of slack here because there's only so much room on a slide, so I'm going to whiz forward to 97, which is when the Deep Blue computer beat Garry Kasparov at chess, and there'll be a number of people who probably remember when that happened. Caused a bit of a sensation. It was a little bit discombobulating because the whole idea that a machine could beat a human at doing something that we thought was pretty cool and took a lot of skill was something that started to be a bit frightening. The next biggest thing to happen in artificial intelligence happened in 2002 where the Roomba came out. So the Roomba are those little round vacuum cleaner, artificial intelligence robots that clean your floor and have become the second most prolific robot on the face of the planet at the moment. And this is well attested to. If you go to YouTube and you search up Roomba, you will see many, many clips of cats enjoying rides around floors on Roombas. So there are many of them out there. In 2011, Watson won a whole bunch of stuff on Jeopardy and upset a whole bunch of people. Again, it was another example of AI being a lot smarter than we thought that perhaps it could be. And then in the same year, you started to see Siri come out on the iPhone 4. So that was the first time that AI started to be something that we could hold in our hands. It moved from being something that was part of the corporate tech sector and started to be something that was more of a consumer end product. In 2014, Alexa was launched by Amazon. And last year in 2017, AlphaGo beat Lee Zedong, who's the world champion at the game Go. And there's a really fantastic documentary called AlphaGo that's really worth having a look at, not just because it's technologically pretty marvellous what went on, but what happens when machines start to interact with humans is also quite fascinating. And you can learn a lot about being human by watching humans interact with machines. So worth having a look. A couple of phrases that I just wanted to get clear in all of this too, because it's a little confusing, is the phrases of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the deep learning piece. So essentially, they're all part of artificial intelligence. But machine learning is the part where you get a data feed coming in and the machine is calculating really, really fast. Deep learning is when you get multiple data feeds coming in and it starts to become very complex. So in a sense, these are phrases that are used to describe a level of complexity in terms of the artificial intelligence that you're dealing with. So we've got a whole bunch of artificial intelligences around us. Here's a bunch of them. You might know some of these. These include the Google Alexa, the Roomba is there, and I particularly wanted to show you this little one here that's maybe let me go back. The one in the middle that looks like an egg is the Replica. This is a little bit of homework you can do if you like. So a replica is an artificial intelligence that you can talk to. It was designed by a bunch of people who wanted to create an artificial intelligence that you could talk to by texting. And you can pop it on your phone this afternoon and start having a chat with it. And it's designed for young people to have a conversation so that they can practice how they feel and sort out how they might approach an issue before they actually get into a social issue. right? So if you've got a high level of anxiety, just by working stuff out with the artificial intelligence, it can help you just to settle that anxiety down a bit. I have to say to you as a parent, I'm thinking about a few other anxieties that I'm feeling around that, but if the kids are using that to sort of get on with each other a whole lot better, then that's a good thing. So one of the most impressive artificial intelligences is also born in New Zealand, and that's Baby X. And some of you may have seen on TVNZ recently the Nigel Lattis show around The Curious Mind, where they talked about Baby X. But for those who haven't, Baby X was designed by Mark Sagar. He was a professor at the University of Auckland, and he spun out the Centre for Animate Technologies, which has become a company called Soul Machines. And so they're the organisation that own the IP around all of this now. Baby X is a neural-based network that uses all of the sensors on a laptop, basically to receive information that you give it just by looking at it and talking to it, and then to reflect back a very human experience that is designed by Mark based on a mimicry or a copying of human biology. So this is an AI that has dopamine levels, for example, that you can dial up and dial down, and then the artificial intelligence will respond accordingly. So it's picking up what it's seeing from your computer and making the interface that we have with the artificial intelligence that sits behind it a whole lot easier. And it gets us in a comfortable place. There is a term called the uncanny valley in artificial intelligence and robotics. And what that's all about is it describes the state where we see something that we know is mechanical and robotic, but it's weirdly almost human, but not quite there. And for all of us, we get a ugh factor, okay? When you're feeling that with artificial intelligence, that's clearly a barrier to picking up and using the technology. But that's when you're in the uncanny valley. So Baby X led to Nadia, and I just want to show you a clip from a segment that's on YouTube about the making of Nadia, which was one of their next artificial intelligences.
I'm a virtual assistant and I'm here to help you.
This is the bringing together of disability entrepreneurs, the best of the public service, the most brilliant scientists, Academy Award winners in a scientific and creative effort.
It's probably one of the most innovative projects in the world right now.
She looks like a person, but she's a super smart computer that responds in a very natural way.
I can hear you, and if you have a webcam, I can see you too.
NDIS users like you have tested me along the way and helped make me what I am today.
So Nadia solved a problem that disability users in Australia have had for a long time. And that is that when you have a disability, often the way that you access services that you are entitled to use is difficult because of your disability. Unhelpfully, a lot of Australian disability service providers ask you to connect with those services through web pages, and those web pages can be very difficult for a lot of people. So what Nadia does is Nadia allows you to set up an account. Nadia gets to know you, gets to know your disability and the limitations of your disability, and then will match up your disability and what you're entitled to with the service provider. Now, unfortunately, Nadia hasn't launched. And part of the reason that Nadia hasn't launched is because when some of the service providers figured out that the artificial intelligence was going to make that access easier, they realised they were going to get more volume than they could handle. So while we have had AI sort of resolve or address a really, really helpful problem, we still have human barriers in the way. And it is the case with a lot of artificial intelligence that that's going to be part of our challenge as we figure out how we might want to use this technology for ourselves. Sitting behind the Soul Machines platform is IBM Watson, and I just wanted to start talking a little bit about what are these things, what does artificial intelligence actually look like? Well, that's what it looks like. And in fact, this is kind of a souped up version, because any IT people in the room, okay, so you guys all know that what this really looks like is just a big black box, right? And that if you need to make a server look sexy, what you have to do is to put a sheet of Perspex glass in front of it, backlight it, and put a logo on the front, right? So actually, for the most part, this doesn't look quite as interesting. But you can actually get into, all of us today can start an account and we can get into and start playing with IBM Watson this afternoon. And you do that by going to the Bluemix catalogue webpage. And there's a whole bunch of stuff I've got to Google. I've got for you to Google later. But essentially when you do that and you set up your account, and it's just like setting up a Facebook account, so it doesn't take very long. And then what you get is this. And what this is essentially your menu of all the things that you can play with in order to create some artificial intelligence, right? So you might want to start playing with a chatbot. You might decide that you've already done a little bit of that and you want to enhance the tone of it, or how it picks up or recognises different languages. So all of those things are there, and you can add on to your artificial intelligence and build it. So and a lot of this is increasingly drop and drag too. If you have a product and there's only a smaller segment of community that understand how to code these things, then one of the problems you have to solve is how do you get people who don't code how to use, the opportunity to use artificial intelligence, and that's drop and drag coding. So I've got some references for you on that as well. Anyway, so artificial intelligence has started to explode in a whole bunch of areas. Here's a bunch of uses in the legal area. Here's a bunch of uses in property and construction. I have to say to you, part of my day job is talking to builders. So I can't wait for that robot on the bottom right-hand side. You'll notice that there are very few health and safety issues going on there at the moment. So I'm loving that one. But there's all sorts of ways that artificial intelligence is either making sure that we're installing things properly in the top left-hand corner, or using facial recognition, object recognition to see that the worker in the top right-hand corner isn't wearing the right protective gear, to artificial intelligence in retail. On the right-hand side, you can spot the lady, well, I was going to say the lady in blue, the artificial intelligence in blue, that's Rachel, it's another Soul Machines AI, to new ways of checking out food that won't actually require them to be wrapped or tagged or barcoded, to perhaps one of the world's most advanced warehouses that supports the Alibaba empire, which is about 3 times larger than Amazon at the moment. Those are changing, of course. A whole bunch of stuff happening in financial services. One of the more interesting areas is smart contracts and automated AI trading. There's this AI trader bot down the bottom is something that's actually stalled. Again, another human problem. The AI algorithm ended up being so good at training, it was outperforming the top 500 in the New York Stock Exchange by 3%, which is absolutely unheard of. And all of a sudden people realised that that's what was happening, and so the people who owned the data feed that went into the AI cut the feed off. So that hasn't actually been able to work since September of last year. And again, very human problems and challenges that we have. The moral of that story is own your own data, I think. We also have artificial intelligence essentially selling itself in the cloud. So this is Microsoft, Amazon, IBM and Google, and these are all free accounts that you can start playing with this afternoon. Essentially, all of that means that around the world, the revenues, global revenues from artificial intelligences have gone up exponentially. We have started from these early market entrants in the field that we were talking about earlier to essentially a market that looks like this. So that's what it looked like at the end of 2017 around the world, and they continue to grow. So if you're interested in understanding more about artificial intelligence, there's a huge amount of information out there, and here are some of the links, this is the moment for the camera, that you might like to follow up later on. So what I've put up there is some pretty they're not highly technical, but some of the tech AI references that you might like to Google and just have a read about a variety of different areas. Across the bottom, I've put some of the sites and the applications that you might be interested in if you want to play around. If you're not a coder at the moment, you would like to learn more about that, you can put an app on your smartphone this afternoon and start playing with it. And of course, if you get more interested in it, there's a whole bunch of courses that are available online that you can take to broaden your interest. Udemy at the moment have a very impressive artificial intelligence course for a whole $11.99, ladies and gentlemen. So this afternoon, that's something that you can start to have a bit of a play around with. And of course, you've got the Replica app. So that's a way lot of fun. Okay, so all of that for us at the University of Canterbury and in Learning Resources Department really said to us that we have a few challenges around being disrupted. First of all, it feels like there's a huge amount coming, and we didn't think that was going to slow down. But also, with all of that coming, there was a sense of what can we actually predict. So the impact of a single technology is something that's quite tough because there's so many different uses for something like artificial intelligence. And then when you think about how it might converge with other things, so for example, there's some very interesting innovations in the area of smart contracts, which is a combination of blockchain and AI. And that's even harder to predict what will happen if there's multiple technologies that get together. And then we know also that there's some of the use of that is about automating the work that we do. So that's changing the things that we might do every day. And we're doing less of the actual transactions and the doing, and we're doing more of the thinking about how we do the doing. So that's kind of interesting. And so this whole idea that we might be going through periods of change has, in a sense, to us anyway, we've reached the conclusion that this is a pretty perpetual thing now. So how do we prepare for that? And one of the conclusions that we reached is that we need to be learning agile. So learning agile is a state of working and being, where essentially by rapidly trying new things and failing at some things as well, by the way, because that's part of learning, that basically we learn new ways of working and we were able to constantly adapt. So when we broke that down into some of the areas that we would need to work on in order to get into this a lot more, we were talking about things that, interestingly to me, has a great parallel with a lot of the stuff that we talk about when we talk about cultural change. So finding new information, creative problem solving, people coming together and connecting, and finding ways of doing things in a new way. So that was kind of actually quite comforting, given that we had started our cultural change journey. So just using that idea of the toolbox that I mentioned before, there were 3 areas that we wanted to start working on. The first of all was the leadership team. The second was how we would engage our workforce. And the third would be initiatives that we would run that would support our ability to develop how we would learn how to learn. The first piece was the leadership team. And the reason that's the first piece is because you cannot do this alone. This is a big, hairy problem. So the first thing you do is you've got to find a whole bunch of mates who are going to help you with it. And that's essentially your leadership team, right? So I was after developing a leadership team that was going to help me to get a whole bunch of results. And along the way, part of what that team and I did is we figured out the way that we were going to work that was going to make that possible. One of the big things, and I'll talk about it again in a moment, it was making sure that we were authentic. And what I mean by that is really showing up. This division that we have between our private selves and our professional selves, to me, is bollocks. It's a highly technical term that means that we don't believe it. It's about you are who you are, and we love that about you, and we want you to show up every day at work. And part of the reason that becomes a very powerful thing in the context of perpetual change is that no one follows you if they think they are being taken for a ride. So if you don't show up and convince people that this is for real, then people go, yeah, I'm just going to sit back here and wait to see what happens and let them go off and do that stuff. So we talked a lot about what it meant and our comfort zone around actually being authentic at work all the time. A whole lot of respect and compassion for one another. If people don't like each other, if they don't trust one another, much, much harder to get that collaboration happening. Creativity and being open and ability to learn and want to engage with new material, whether we necessarily felt comfortable with it or not, was pretty key. Personal courage. We put that one in because sometimes some of the stuff that we have to do is hard. Sometimes some of the issues that need to be addressed and moved in order to get an outcome are uncomfortable. I've got to say, from my own perspective, I kind of find a strange sort of comfort in it being uncomfortable. I feel like the moment that the hard stuff gets comfortable, then I have somehow managed to disconnect with stuff so much that you start to become one of those corporate psychopath people, and that's not us. We don't like to work like that. So a whole bunch of stuff around how we like to work with one another. Mentioned the authenticity, and this was a different moment for everybody in the leadership team as we went through that. We also needed to get real about real feedback. A lot of it was centred in a space where we were really nice to each other. Amongst other things, I run a library And the feedback that people were giving each other in that space was really nice, and trying to make everything land in such a comfortable way that actually the essence of what you were trying to say got lost. So instead, part of what we've tried to do is to move to this radical candor piece. This is a really good piece of work by Kim Scott. Recommend that you have a look at it if some of that is resonating with you. We also spent a great deal of time talking about shame, which we consider to be perhaps the single biggest inhibitor of actually getting a whole bunch of really cool stuff done. And this is shame that comes from that sense that you might be humiliated or somehow publicly chastised. If you try something new, you fail, and then you get hung up to dry. It's that sense. And a lot of our people told us that they were really worried and frightened and anxious about this. And that's where we had to kind of come together and spend a lot of time talking about how we were going to support people through it to convince them to do it. The personal courage piece, really important. I'd mentioned that earlier. The second thing we looked at was how we would engage the workforce, and this is where the Human Synergistics tool gets a nice big plug. We knew we had lots of changes we needed to make. We spent a lot of time, we measured our behaviour at the beginning, spent a lot of time talking about how we would align our intents and our initiatives across different areas of the workforce. The advice was don't rush understanding and enlisting, and that certainly was our experience. We had to spend a lot of time talking about stuff before we could actually act. And I have to say to you, as someone who likes to do lots of stuff, I'm really energised by doing things. It was incredibly difficult as the manager of a large department to let people have their time. So I kind of sat there and went, and then did it again and again and again to allow people the time to actually catch up. So there's a lot of checking of your own behaviour as you go through all of this, I found. We've been retested now one time, and we've shifted some of our behaviour. I think some of us were disappointed about how much, but hey, as the Human Statistics people tell you, you're on the journey, right? So it's all good. Then we have put together a whole bunch of initiatives that support the change and the learning that we do. Some of them are based around the cultural change piece. So we're working on using the OCI, OEI methodologies. We're working on a whole bunch of initiatives there to make sure that we're getting improvements in terms of our teamwork and our collaboration, how we keep each other motivated. So that also is a work in progress. We've taken people from across different parts of my department and made sure that we were blending teams with people with different disciplines and different work experiences. And we run 2 initiatives around cultural change. People self-select in to those, but we have a cap on the numbers, and we release people from daily duties in order to do that work because it's important. We also run what we call FedEx Days. And of course, FedEx is a trademarked term. We're still trying to come up with what we're going to call it. But of course, it has its history in this very old advertising that's around the whole concept that you need something done overnight. So the exercise is basically a hackathon or a day where we come together. The staff can register and form teams from all over the place to work on a problem. It needn't be a work problem. It's just a problem that they would like to spend a bit of time working on. And then at the end of the day, everyone kind of comes together. There's usually lots of hilarity at this point, and people are giving a ridiculously short period of time to feedback. But essentially what we do is then celebrate all the effort that we have put into the day and the effort that people have made. So some of the things that have come out of that have been work for charities. We had one group solve a problem around spatial analysis using machine learning. They hadn't learnt about machine learning before, but they'd done some research and kind of all brought it together on the day. So that worked really well. The other thing that we have spent a bit of time doing is working an initiative around bringing together a team to achieve an objective around HoloLens. So HoloLens is technology that is essentially an augmented reality headset. And what that means is it projects a holographic image on a set of glasses inside the headset just in front of your eyes. And what that does is as you look through them into your room, it means that it looks like the holographs in the room. When I played around with this some years ago, about 4 years ago now, it was really obvious to me that there would be a great benefit to learning from this type of technology. And what you see up there is Western Case University in the States, who started to build a medical faculty around this technology because medicine is largely one of the most expensive things to teach, apart from veterinary science, as it turns out. So we're just trying to find, they're exploring new ways of doing this. Like we are anticipating that at universities this will increasingly be some of the tools that we use to learn. So we needed to figure out what we would do around supporting all of that. So we did a call out for people who would be interested in doing something really, really different, not even vaguely aligned with their day jobs. So what the first call out was all about attitude. You've got to be in this, committed to spending a bit of your own time. The deal was we would put some time in and release you from some of your work, but you will put some of your own time in. We had applicants from right across the department. The management team brought them together and basically formed up a team. Then we had to address the issue of how we released them from time, because we've had to do that a few times through the whole process. The original amount of time we thought we might need to release people for turned out to be too little, so we've had to vary it as we go through. Then we had to induct the team, bring them together and give them essentially some space to come together in. And then we had to explain to everyone else why they weren't able to make it onto that gig, because a couple of things happened. Some people kind of sat back and went, oh, that's a bit scary, see how you go. And a whole bunch of other people went, oh, how come I couldn't do that? So that was kind of nice. We got them thinking about the roles that they might like to take on. We had people from cleaning supervisors, senior construction project managers, librarians, e-learning designers. We had a systems admin guy, and they all had to take on these types of roles. So their primary role might have been closer to their day job, but their secondary role had to be the stretch part of the exercise, because the real objective of this initiative was learning how to learn. It wasn't actually about the HoloLens. That was just the bribery. That was the clickbait to get people involved and to forget, right, that they're going to do something that for the most part we report as being really scary to do. So the whole idea that they might get to play with something really cool got a lot of people to sign up for this. So that worked quite well. There was a lot of discussion around these roles. People had to go and find out what some of the roles were. They had to figure out themselves, without support, how they were going to do it. And as a team, they had to come together and figure out how they're going to support one another. They came up with an indicative timeline, and then we changed it. And we went and found ourselves a client. So we're currently working with the Antarctic Centre in Christchurch, and part of what we're doing is putting together a HoloLens experience for 10 to 12-year-olds with respect to the impact of plastics in Antarctica and on the wildlife. So that was the client brief. That's what they were after. That's what the client, I think, right at the beginning, that's what they wanted to get out of this. It's kind of what we were working on. But for a bunch of people who didn't know very much about technology and knew even less about HoloLens, this is what they have now started to create. So what this is being shown in one of our classrooms actually at the University of Canterbury, but will actually be in the foyer space at the Antarctic Centre when you get there. There's a number of different artefacts that appear in the room around you. The penguins talking normally, guiding you through the exercise. There's nasty, horrible pieces of plastic around the room. This was an earlier prototype. I think many of them would be deeply embarrassed that I'm showing you this, but I'm very proud of the work that they had done, given that none of them knew anything about this to begin with. And then this robot thing, that's a robot with a snorkel, will whiz around, and the kids essentially play this game where it zaps the pieces of plastic, and that's part of their introduction to a supporting exhibition that the Antarctic Centre runs. So the cool technology was essentially what motivated people to get involved. The staff had to make a commitment beyond their day job to be part of the initiative. We had to spend a lot of time working with people, getting them past their reluctance and their fear of the shame that might come if they failed. But they were also really driven to do something cool and to help us figure out how learning would be able to be part of the way that we just run every day, so that when we have these technologies come through the door, regardless of what they are, we would have learnt how to learn and will be a better place to be ready for all of that. So imagine what you might be able to do in terms of your own learning cultural journey, and let's get in and do some workshopping around that, Darren. Thanks.